The critical factor is when you make an EVP, you really need to be consistent with your approach because it has to be an authentic statement. You can have nice statements out there to say, hey, this is what our EVP is, and you can tell it out loud in public. From the point someone stepping into the organization, they'll start realizing what they put out there and in a statement is not actually happening. Right. So that is where the authenticity comes to play.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Synapse by Sentiva. I'm Ashan Rodrigo, and today we will be diving into a very important topic in the HR space, which is employer branding, which we believe is the key to attracting and retaining top talent in a very competitive job market. Did you know that 86% of job seekers check out the company's culture and values before applying to a job? And with the rise of social media and other websites such as Glassdoor, LinkedIn, companies no longer control this narrative. Their employees do. So how do organizations ensure that they are positioned as an employer of choice? Joining me today is Kaushal Mendis, a seasoned HR leader with over 19 years of experience across a diverse set of industries such as apparel, tobacco, logistics, and quick service restaurants. And his extensive expertise spans industrial and employee relations, compensation management, and also talent management, which are all very critical areas in terms of helping shape a thriving workplace. Today, we'll tap into his wealth of knowledge and discuss employer branding, talent retention, as well as the future of work. Welcome, Kaushal, to Synapse by Sentiva.
Thank you, Ashan. Thank you very much for having me here.
How are you doing today?
Very good.
That's great, that's great. All right, let's get down to the brass tacks. What is employer branding, and how do you think this is different from the more traditional corporate branding that we all know?
All right, so a traditional corporate branding, you will brand a product. But employer branding is something about the employer, something about the organization in the eyes of a potential employee. So it is a set of perceptions or an image we create, we plant, we paint in the heads, in the minds of a potential employee. If you compare it to a traditional corporate branding, let's say if we go to a roadside shop and if we want to buy a toothpaste, we might not ask the Mudalali what a toothpaste ekak denna. Instead, we will ask a specific brand. So that's a brand which is created in our heads. So as in the current competitive talent landscape, it is very important for organizations to create that brand, the top of the mind brand in the heads of potential employees, for them to attract the right talent for their organizations.
Right. Okay. So why do you believe that employer branding as a concept has become very vital in talent acquisition today?
Okay. So today's world is very different to what we had maybe 10-15 years ago, because everyone, the majority of the employees who walk into the workforce are Gen Zs. Okay. Majority, I would say more than 75%. So in that context, how they look at the world, how they look at things, how they perceive things, how they look at their potential employees is very different to how the candidates looked at these elements before. So they look at flexibility, they look at purpose, they look at adaptability, they look at how well they can blend in with an organization. So unless otherwise we don't talk about our brand, unless otherwise we speak up to the world and say, hey, this is what we are, this is how special we are, no one will really get to know who we are as an organization. So in that context, for us to create a competitive advantage over our competitors or over the other organizations who hunt for the same talent, that's where the employer branding come to play. So that we will use different elements to talk to the potential audience to say, hey, look at this is what we offer, and you should seriously consider us as your next employee. So that's why really it matters in the current context.
Right. So it's basically about putting the company's image and sort of making you sort of a likable and better option for candidates.
Exactly.
To apply to. Yeah. Right. Right. So what do you think are the key components of a strong employer brand?
So one of the key components should be your employee value proposition. So employee value proposition will definitely define what the organization has to offer to a candidate. So beyond that, And I think the rest of the things will be formed as part and parcel of the employee value proposition, such as the organizational culture, maybe the leadership of the organizational purpose, how best the organization adapt the DEI, how safe the organization is, the flexibilities they offer. So, all these little things will form part and parcel of a strong employer brand, but I think they will be wrapped around the employee value proposition. So, your EVP becomes key.
Right. So I think for our listeners out there, how about we give them like an explanation of what exactly employer value proposition is as well?
Okay. So, employee value proposition, I would say it's a bold statement we do, right? It's a bold statement of telling the potential employees as to why you should join my company, what we have in store for them. For an employee, they might have different expectations from an employer. One could be their career, where they will land in terms of a job and how they will progress in their career ladder. So, that forms one part. Then someone will want to know what sort of reward structure that they will get into, right? If they perform well, what they will have in terms of rewards. And some will be interested to have to know what they will be contributing to. Could be the purpose of the organization, could be the vision of the organization, and whether these individual expectations will blend in with the organizational expectations. Some will want to know what sort of flexibility the organization have to offer. So, likewise, in the employee value proposition, we include all these things together and tell the potential employees as a statement to say, if you join ABC organization, these are the things that you will have by way of joining the organization. So, it's a very strong statement what we tell to the potential candidates. But the critical factor is when you make when we make an EVP, you really need to be consistent with your approach, right? Because it has to be an authentic statement. You can have nice statements out there to say, hey, this is what our EVP is, and you can tell it out loud in public. But when someone comes into the organization, from the point someone stepping into the organization, they will start realizing what they put out there and in a statement is not actually happening. Right. So, that is where the authenticity comes to play.
Right. Okay. Yes, so I believe a big thing in most companies, in some companies that you would see is the lack of authenticity as well. It could be. Right. So, do you think EVP is enough and it is compelling enough to attract top candidates to a company?
So, as I said, the EVP needs to be supported by so many other things, right? So, your EVP is a statement, but that statement will come to life provided the support structure operates well. For an example, you can have a fancy EVP, but unless otherwise it is practiced, there's of no use. But for you to practice such a strong promise to potential employees, it is not only to the potential employees, but it is to your existing employees also, because it's all about future employees as well as current employees, right? So, one of the fundamentals is whether the leadership is providing their sponsorship to drive this EVP, because unless otherwise it is driven from the boardroom, it is driven by your top leaders of the organization, it becomes a failure, because HR can't, the human resources department can't clap single handedly. It has to be a collective effort. And when the leadership supports as a core pillar of success, then the rest of the things fall in line. The organizational culture will start supporting the EVP, and the organization will have so many policies, practices which will help the employees to do well in their careers. So, what I want to mention is EVP as a statement will not be able to attract and retain your star performers, but it has to be helped by the leadership practice, the leadership promise, as well as the organizational policies and procedures to bring it to life.
Right. Okay. So let's switch over into like a bit of a different thing. So let's take, in the modern context, digital presence is something that plays a major role in terms of attracting talent and employer branding. So how do you think career pages and employee review sites and social media such as LinkedIn, what sort of part do they play in the employer branding sense?
I think they play a very pivotal role right now, because I can remember when I wanted to find a job soon after school, the first thing what I did was the Sunday Observer back then, because Sunday Observer, the jobs section was the bulkiest section in the paper, because there was no digital presence back then. This is 2002, 2003 I'm talking about. But things have completely changed now. If you take the newspapers right now, your job section is about 4 pages max. But the job boards, online job boards, job portals are the ones which really drives it. And so as the platforms such as LinkedIn, Indeed, so many e-platforms that talks about the jobs, the career opportunities. Now, in order to do this, every organization needs to get on digital platforms, because they need to talk about the organization on digital platforms, because that's it's a boundless platform, right? Even if your organization is in Colombo, you should be able to talk about your organization to a candidate in Kandy, Jaffna, or maybe a Sri Lankan who's living in overseas that who is wanting to come back to Sri Lanka. So, the digital platforms give you that boundless access. As well as digital platforms will give you the creativity to do a lot with less resources, do a lot with less effort, so that you can talk to multiple audiences, you can do multiple messaging at a lesser cost, and with a greater level of creativity.
Right. Okay. And what about in terms of employee review sites, such as, for example, Glassdoor? How do you think they would affect this, the employer branding of a company?
So now, when we say employee review sites, the general phenomena is that people use employee review platforms for negative branding, right? So generally, if you go to Glassdoor, what you generally see is at times, people talk. They mark certain negative comments. But as an organization, what you really want to do is whether you want your employees to talk about the negativities of an organization, whether they are present or past employees, or you want them to you want them to be converted to employee advocates to talk about the positivities of the organization, right? So that's what you want to do as an organization. But however, let's say employee review platforms, it's a good opportunity for employees to go and talk about the organization, right? Whether it's bad or good. Mm-hmm. But the challenge to the organization is how you can create the possible negative sentiments of employees to the positive sentiments, whereas they will go talk on these digital platforms with a pride about where you work, with an immense happiness about where you work, so that it will go to multiple audiences as a positive advocacy. So in that case, employee review platforms such as Glassdoor, Indeed, and even at times you have LinkedIn, you have Facebook. At times people go comment, yes, and these comments will at times go viral, right? So it's very, very important that organizations do make use of it in a positive manner.
Right, that makes sense. And what about concepts such as the candidate experience? So I believe that is something that also plays a very key role in how a potential employee, a job seeker would view the organization. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with 100%. I agree with you 100%, because let's say, Ashan, so if you take a position, let's say that we want to hire HR executive, right? When we advertise this, assume that you get 100 CVs, right? And out of which, let's say you shortlist 20 candidates. You long list 20 candidates, you shortlist 10 candidates, you have 10 chats, but out of which you will hire only one, right? So what do you think? There are 99 people who got rejected, right? this one employee who comes into the organization talking about the organization versus the sentiments of these 99 people, right? So the potential pitfalls is that we are so eager to close a position, right? So when we want to close a position, all what we do is to go through the CVs, to go through the recruitment process, selection process, and to hire this candidate and get that person on board. We often tend to neglect the experiences, the expectations, the desires, anxiety of these 99 people, right? So generally what we do is we ghost them. That is what is generally happening. It shouldn't be the case. So I can still remember, I'll quote an example. Back in 2003, one of my dreams was to get into Brandix, and there was a management trainee program, and I wasn't a graduate back then, I was studying. So one of the criteria is for you to be a graduate for you to apply for a management trainee program. So I applied for it for the heck of it, and I didn't get a call for interview. So but after back then there were no emails, no phone calls, no mobiles, not majorly in use. But after a few weeks, I got a letter in the Brandix letterhead, A5 size letter, to say a regret letter, right? But at least it made me happy. I got a letter from Brandix, and till to date I have that letter with me. And after many years, I think I joined Brandix back in 2006, but even after maybe 23 years, I talk about it with a happy sense to say, hey, I got it. So candidate experience is key. You shouldn't ever be ghosting a candidate, even that person doesn't get selected, because they will go talk about the experiences elsewhere. And also during the process, how you treat your candidates, whether you treat them with respect. So I can remember once I was interviewed for a position at Hemas. There was this girl called Roshini Fernando. I think she is one of the best HR receptions that I've got, right? And how she took care of me as a candidate. Right. I mean, after many years, I still talk about that, the name, my experience, that organization. See, a little amount of work someone thoughtfully does can create a lot of a compounding positive impact. So candidate experience is very key. And right now, I think we have a great opportunity where embed technology, involve technology to create a superior candidate experience.
Right, I completely agree with you as well. I think in terms of candidate experience, it plays a massive role, because each and every one of us, we've applied to jobs at some point or the other in our lives, and rejection is hard, yes, but when it actually comes to you in the form of a letter, an email, it softens the blow a little bit, I believe. So yes.
And also, Ashan, the feedback. Some organizations goes up to the extent of giving feedback, so that you also help the candidate, a failed candidate, to do better in the next interview, so that you create a very positive impression about the organization inside the heads of these employees, to say, hey, look here, even though they didn't select me, at least they were thoughtful and helpful for me to have feedback so that I could do better in a future interview.
Right, that is true, that is true. So attracting top talent is, I will believe, only half the battle, right? What is where employer branding really shines is in terms of retention. So what type of strategies do you think companies can use in order to retain the employees that they already have?
Okay, so I have quite a saying for this. It's a Sinhala saying. In Sinhala we say, loketa parakase gedarata maragate, means that you have all the branding out there, and you so boast about what you do outside, but when it comes to your own place, you don't have house in order, right? So that's the same even when it comes to employer branding. We can have fancy statements and say, this is what we give, this is our culture, this is the flexibility we have, but the moment the employee walks in, things could be very different. So one of the fundamental rules, or the fundamental guidelines, fundamental basis of employer branding is that you always need to have inside out approach, right? Before you do external employer branding, you need to do internal employer branding, so that your internal employees stay with you and they will start believing in you. So one of the best ways of crafting your EVP, crafting your branding strategy is where you seek feedback from your internal employees. You listen to them, and you can ask what the expectations are, what is happening right, what is not happening right. If we have to do it properly, how can we do this? We make them a part of it, right? So first you need to win your own employees. When you win your own employees, what happens is they become ambassadors. So some of the organizations where I worked, places like British American Tobacco, we had solid programs of employee ambassadorship programs, because we always believe, rather than we shoot stones out there without a focus, when you really have a focus, that your results, your productivity is high. Let's say that we go out and talk to the public about a general message, and the level of absorption could be to a certain level, but let's say we have 20 solid employee ambassadors, whereas they go tell that message to 10 of their friends. Each one go tell it to 10, means 100 or 200. So which is a very solid advocacy. So one of the best things to retain your employees is internal employer brand. In order to do that, you need to get them engaged, you need to get them involved, and you need to recognize them for the great work they do. And when you recognize them, when you involve them, and when you also start talking about some of these initiatives outside, when you make them part of the big deal, your retention is a no-brainer. For an example, some of the things that we do in Pakistan and even in Sri Lanka is that we take them to talk to their universities. For an example, some of these employees, they have joined the organization in junior positions. After many years, they have climbed the ladder, they are holding top positions. And what we do is, now we want them to go to their universities, to their schools with pride. So whenever we want to do initiatives, we take them. So it's not HR who's driving, it's that employee who drives it. It gives him immense pleasure. And to go back to the universities, and he said, hey, look here, that I was made by this university, right? I'm a product of this university, and today, after many years, that I come here and talk about my organization who gave me a career. So look at the level of authenticity of that messaging. How powerful is that? Because those are not crafted messages, those are not arranged skits. It comes from the heart. So those authentic messaging and internal employer branding will really help you to retain your top talent.
Right, I agree with that as well. So I think in terms of, I quite like the word ambassadors when you use it, because because anyways word of mouth is a big part of when it comes to attracting talent as well. And if you have these ambassadors and they would just talk to their friends, and one of the first things that you would ask before you apply for a job in a company is if you have friends there or anyone that you know, and then you would ask them, is this place good? What are your thoughts? Are you enjoying working there? And especially in context of Gen Z, it's something that they really look at. So what about things like workplace culture? How does that affect employee retention?
So that is paramount important, because culture is the bedrock of any organization. So culture again depends on the industry where you are in, the type of people you have in the organization, and the purpose of the organization, and what the organization wants to achieve. The culture in a startup organization may be very different to a culture in a structured corporate organization. The culture in a consultancy organization will be very different to a culture in a manufacturing organization, because those factors will come into play. But I believe culture is the bedrock of any organization, which fuels the growth, which fuels the talent, which fuels the attraction and retention of its key talent. So if at all, if you want to have a successful organization, I think one should always invest in building a great culture.
Right, that is true. And in terms of communication and everything within a workplace culture, how do you think leadership and how would the leadership teams impact how the employees perceive their workplaces?
Okay, so communication again is key. Now today during this conversation, I think repeatedly used a word called authenticity. Because when we communicate, what we really want to have is the employees, our teams, should believe in us. So they should always feel that the leaders talk to them with a greater deal of authenticity, a genuinity and sincerity. Because what happens is these organizations are built by people, built of people, right? And all these employees come from different parts of the country, could be different socioeconomic backgrounds, different schools, different universities, and they have unique problems, unique situations in their own lives. And what we now expect is, we expect everyone to come together in an organization and work towards the objectives of the organization. Now, how you could take them to a common goal is, one is the culture, but in order for you to drive the culture, you need to have solid communications, right? These communications, as I said before, needs to be truthful, needs to be authentic, needs to be genuine, sincere, and it needs to be consistent and frequent as well, because you can't have a communication with your employees once a year and expect them to work on. The more you communicate, the more it will happen the well, right? So, and what happens is, it doesn't necessarily need to be a town hall meeting or a formal meeting. Your communications could be in groups. You'll have a lot of your informal communications, small talks, the pep talks, the coffee talks will also serve as powerful communication than formal communication, because it will really get you a candid time for you to chat with your employees. So it is key.
Right. So in terms of employee branding, it could very easily backfire if not done authentically, as you mentioned. So what do you think are some common mistakes that organizations would make in terms of employee branding?
So Ashan, I think almost all the things what we discussed, the opposite of it will, of course, will create a negative brand, right? But if we are to talk about the possible pitfalls, is where number one is that you misrepresent what is in the organization, but you say fancy things, right? So what happens is that you misinterpret or misrepresent of your current state or the desired state, but when an employee comes in, that they'll realize that it is not the case. And as you correctly said, the current generation is a generation where they rely a lot on references. So then what you generally do is you dig your own grave. You shouldn't be doing that. And one of the problems that possible problems that could also occur is that the HR teams, young dynamic teams, they are very passionate about what they want to do. So at times they craft the employer branding strategy without really obtaining the support of the leadership, right? So they have a fancy strategy they want to do, but still, when you don't have the support of your leadership, then you won't be able to do it. And also you can have a solid strategy in place to talk to the externals, but when it is not happening inside, if an employee makes a comment to say, hey, look at that, you guys are talking all CRAP, but things are not the same inside, maybe on an employee review platform, your credibility goes for a 6. So I think those are some of the things what you really want to look at. But if you really become authentic about what you want to do, and if you really invest your time, effort and money there, I think we can really have a solid piece of employer branding.
Right. So as you mentioned, negative reviews is something that could come across at any time, right? How do you suppose a company or an organization could combat these negative reviews?
See, negative reviews you can't stop. As I told you, like we have employees coming from different backgrounds, and also one sentiment now will not be the same sentiment tomorrow. So all these things are based on situations, right? Situations could lead employees to make negative sentiments. At times, they might regret about it later. But if something is released to the digital space, it is done. But the organizations, at times, what I've seen is, with my experience, I myself have become sensitive about certain negative sentiments or negative statements or negative feedback. We all are humans, we are scared, we are reluctant to have negative feedback. But I think how we can build strong as a brand, or to be resilient as a brand, or to be bounce back stronger, is how we manage these negative sentiments. For an example, let's say if an employee or an anonymous review on Glassdoor or any other platform about a negative sentiment about the organization, something bad feedback. Either we can ignore it, which is bad, but also what we can do is we can look into it and see why it is. And also what you see is if these sentiments, these feedback has a certain pattern, it's repeatedly it's coming there, so which means there's some truth to it. So what you really need to do is, number one, you need to see where the issue is. Unless otherwise you have the ability to figure it by yourself, then what you can do is you can have maybe focus group meetings or employee review feedback, where you can really now use tech to facilitate these things and to identify where the issue is. Now, if you identify the real issue, it's easy to fix, right? You know where the issue is, now you can fix it. So, you have fixed. Now, how you can do? The bouncing back is from there. So, then what you can do is you can talk about how you fixed it out there in public. So, it becomes part of your employer branding strategy to say, hey, look at that, couple of weeks ago that we've got a negative sentiments, now we acted upon, this is what we've changed. So, imagine the credibility builds the organization out there to say, hey, even this organization is not scared of negative feedback, even it is negative, they've taken it positively, constructively, and they've worked on it. So, so they have acted upon. So, if you really pay focus, if you are not scared of negative feedback, and if you take action, those will be very powerful tools for you to come out as an authentic or bounce back as an authentic employee who really cares about employee experiences.
Right. So, in terms of making promises, in terms of creating this company culture, especially by from the leadership teams and everything. So, what if they overpromise on its employer branding and then their delivery, they underdeliver basically? So, how do you think they could combat that?
In order to do that, I think again all what we can do is listen to our employees, right? Because not every employee will go put a comment on a digital platform, but instead what will happen is there will be signs of these overpromises, underdeliveries. One of the signs is your productivity will start dropping, your attrition will start rising. So, these are some of the dipsticks where an employer can use to understand there is something wrong in the system. So, in such a situation what you need to do is, rather than you hiring someone from outside to understand what the issue is, the best advocates is your existing employees. You need to go to them and tell, hey, look here, that we understand there is an issue, maybe we do not know what the cause is, but you need to help us to understand what it is. Yes, we understand your problem what it is now, but also we think you are the best people to suggest us a solution, because the problem lies with you, problem lies with the organization, problem lies with the environment you work. So, you make them part of the problem and part of the solution. So, that what we do is we really act upon what they say. So, they might give their suggestions, we will also put our thinking together and we will arrive at a common solution. When we arrive at a common solution, it becomes no one else's baby, it becomes our baby. So, we have to own it and act upon it. So, especially in situations where, because things we put on statements, we won't be able to do 100%, that is a reality, right? There will be areas where we will struggle to do, but in order to do that we need to have collective effort. So, the best way of doing it is everyone become part of it and get the involvement to make things better, so that no one will feel bad about it, but they will become parts of the problem who want to solve the problem for them and for the organization.
Right. So, basically it's a teamwork makes the dream work kind
exactly,
of situation.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. So, hopping on to like a different side, a little bit of a different area. So, when it comes to the future of work, so hybrid and remote work culture is very common these days across a vast majority of industries and companies. How do you think this influences employer branding?
I think it will shape the tangent of employer branding to a greater level, because as we spoke, the majority of the workforce and who walks into the workforce right now are Gen Zs, and then what will happen is we have to cater to the expectations. If we really look at Gen Zs, they look at flexibility as one of the key expectations in terms of their work, and not only flexibility, they will look at how the freedom they will have in terms of their work and the work setups. So in such situations, working from home or remote working will become something that which we really need to focus and we need to facilitate. You have a lot of gig workers, you have employees who work for startups, you have employees who work for many unstructured organizations. Now you in Sri Lanka, if you go towards the southern coastal belt, you'll have a lot of people who are Europeans but who stay in Sri Lanka, but they work during daytime, right? So in this situation, the challenge is how best you talk about your flexibility to the possible potential talent pools. So that is key, because unless otherwise you talk about how flexible your organization, how supportive your organization with flexible work arrangements, and also tell employees how to use that freedom with a greater deal of responsibility in terms of work, how to create that awareness that creates play. But more than that, I think what will really matter is how you create the company culture, how you shape the company culture. Now imagine a decade back, we hardly had a concept of remote working. So everyone was in office. Where the culture start building is your the water can, the water dispenser, if not your coffee corner, right? People start talking there, and those are the areas where you start building your organizational culture. But right now what happens is when people work remotely, you don't have that in-person touch, right? You don't have that affiliation to your colleagues. So you are working in isolation, you are working in silos. So in such a situation, how we create employee experience where we tie everybody together and to create a superior culture in the organization. So in this case, I think the employer branding will have a major role to play, because number one, the generation whom we are targeting, the generation whom we are working with, as well as the aspirations, and also blending all these things with technology.
Right. And what about the companies that would resist this hybrid and remote culture? Do you think they will struggle to attract talent and retain talent in the future?
So I think it will going to be very problematic for anyone who doesn't want to have that flexibility, because the talent pool is limited, right? It's not that there's a oversupply of talent, right? There's a scarcity of talent. There's a very big demand for talent. The potential employees, the candidates, they have a choice, right? They have a choice to pick the organization as per their preference. Now when it comes to the preference, the target pool, if they love flexibility, if they want freedom, and if the employer is not providing that, they'll say, hey, look at that, I really don't want to join you. Instead, I will join another organization who will give me a greater deal of flexibility, so that I'll be more happy working there. So I don't think in this scenario organizations will have a choice, unless otherwise it is very specific talent to specific industry. For an example, let's say if it is a hospital, you can't have remote working. You need to the employees needs to be there in person. But in many organizations, many industries, you can have remote talent. So unless otherwise you are there, I think every organization need to have a progressive mindset and to appreciate the changes in the generational landscape and the talent landscape, and to cater those requirements so that they will be able to compete in a fair manner and in an easy manner out there.
Right. So basically it's about making yourself more attractive to the job seekers and the people who are applying for your company.
Spot on.
Right. So let's switch over to a little bit of a different area. In terms of learning and development, we've noticed that upskilling themselves is something that employees need, and it is it plays a key role in terms of employee satisfaction. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you, because anyone who joins an organization, they want to go up the career ladder. They want to see themselves bigger and stronger. The only way to do this is facilitating them through learning and development, have a systematic framework for someone to grow in their careers. So there could be certain organizations that who will not invest money on people's development, but in the longer run these organizations will suffer, because the people whom you don't spend, whom you not invest, if they start staying with the organization, what will happen is that you will have a set of obsolete employees in terms of the skills, attitudes and the knowledge for them to do the job. But if an organization, because we are in an ever evolving environment, so every time, every day, every minute things do evolve. So we need to equip our tools. What are our tools? Our tools are the employees, the talent profile. So we need to equip them with the future ready skill set, so that they will do better in the jobs. In return, the organizations will be able to do better with their customer promise. So in that case, learning and development will play a pivotal role in attracting talent, retaining talent, as well as delivering their customer promise.
Right. All right, Kaushal, this has been like a very insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, I would like to know what would be one, we talked about a lot of things about employer branding today. So what would be one key piece of advice you could give to companies who are trying to improve their employer branding?
So the key advice is keep delivering on your promise. Why I say this is that you can have a fancy employer brand, but unless otherwise you deliver what you have promised to your internal employees as well as external candidates, it will not be productive and fruitful. So you need to keep talking to employees, you need to keep investing in your employees, you need to start create a culture which is full of trust, so that the organizations will thrive. So when you do that to your internal employees with a greater deal of respect and with a greater deal of trust, with consistent communications, so what will happen is your employees will start believing in you, and they will also become strong ambassadors of your brand. So the level of effort what you want to do, the level of effort what you want to carry in talking about your brand will become less, right? So what you really want to do is, number one is to deliver on your promise. Number two is start investing on your people, so the brand will definitely follow.
Right. I believe investing in people is something that all organizations should definitely look into as a practice as well. Right. So what about in terms of job seekers? What would you say is one key takeaway for them when they are evaluating potential employers?
Okay. So when they evaluate the employer, first and foremost, you shouldn't be only considering the colors of the advert or the branding of the advert. I mean, that's only one thing, right? And also when you select a job, it's not an organization you pick, or it's not a job you pick in exchange of your efforts, time for a salary, right? But you will pick a job to have a better life, to a better career, better opportunities. So that's something what you really need to consider when you are picking a job. So when you do that, what you can really do as a job seeker is not only to look at the job description, but also to see what that organization is. There are multiple platforms for you to check on an organization, and also not only the organization, but also check on the employees, check on the leaders of that organization, whether those employees, those leaders will be able to add value to your life, whether they will be able to add color to your career. Check on those. And also especially the youngsters, the Gen Zs, they want to see what's the value addition that I do to the society, whether I'll be able to do a value addition, whether I have a purpose, whether my purpose is in tandem with the organization's purpose, organization's value stream. So those are the little things what you really need to see. So my message is not to think only about the salary, but also to think about the organization, the EVP of the organization, the culture of the organization, the leadership of the organization, the purpose of the organization. And in order to do that, you have to make use of that organization's employer brand, and whether this organization is a top of the mind brand of yours, where you have marked that organization as a place for you to go work. So always to consider about the employer brand of the organization. Do your basic checks to see whether that employer brand is an authentic employer brand. If that is authentic brand, don't think twice, go get into the bus.
That wraps up of the first episode of Synapse by Sentiva. A huge thank you, Kaushal, for your valuable insights on employer branding. And to our listeners, what are your thoughts on employer branding? Have you worked for amazing and not so amazing organizations? Let's continue the conversation on TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more content on the future of work. See you next time.